Now let's begin to drill down on some very heavy liftings, because from the International Labour Organization's report on global employment to the African Development Bank's latest on Africa's macroeconomic outlook, as well as Oxfam's survey on the yawning level of inequality and the dampening soundbites out of Davos 2023 in Switzerland, we have come to the end of another business week. So let's do a bit of a review and insights on these headlines and grab a few perspectives into how they all hit here home in Nigeria, heading into a very crucial political transition for the country in a couple of weeks. Welcome my guest tonight, Professor Kenny Ife, who's a development economist and a policy analyst, is live from our Abuja studios. Good evening to you, Professor. It's good to see you again on the show.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let me start by asking you, we've got a couple of reports to look at, but let's start with the Allianz Global Risk Barometer report that ranked macroeconomics, politics, and violence as the top 3 risks for businesses in Nigeria at the moment. How do you respond?
I think they are right, actually. But what is funny is that if you look at the general one that they're ranking, there are 10. The macroeconomy was actually number 10, but incidentally is number 1 for Nigeria. Now, the thing is that there are so many we are subject to so many macroeconomic shocks. Of course, most of it are exogenic, which means they are externally induced. And there's very little you can do because they're all related to our monocultural economy, the dominance of the crude revenue. Which of course is 70%, 79%. And of course gas is 10%, and we have only the liberty around 10%. But that has a knock-on effect on price stability, and you see that rubbing off on inflation, a lot of imported inflation, combining with structural factors. You now have interactive effect on our inflation. But having said that, though, there are other areas around the economy, as you could see some of the reports coming out from the fact that we have to change currency. We all agree that we have to do that. And there are tensions around how long is it going to take and then what quantum of money. All of those are on the front burner at the moment. And again, some other macroeconomic aspects are debt. It's not so much the quantum of the debt, but the vulnerability to shock. Because where you can no longer be comfortable about meeting that obligation, or where it locks down your capacity to spend and then affects all of them will come to the melting pot. So debt sustainability remains a very, very crucial part of it.
Professor, are you surprised, if you look at that Allianz report, that politics and violence got a lot of higher ranking, about 30%, even above electricity, yes, and lack of power? How did we get to a point in which we complain, Nigerians complain about lack of electricity, but violence and political risks is upstaging electricity,
that's right,
energy, infrastructure?
It just tells you, it tells you the high stake in the election, because a lot of people are really waking up to the reality that we really can't let this go by. And there are also concerns about possible policy changes as a result of the election. So I wasn't surprised that the election is playing up because there are so many uncertainties. And of course, you know what happens when you take other factors into consideration. Investor confidence gets a real knock. And that affects all other indicators like poverty and all of that, because if you don't have investment, you don't have productive activity, you don't have employment, so they're all connected. And then you have unsustainable poverty reduction programs, just because the investment is not coming in, and employers and investors are just concerned about the political situation and the likelihood that there may be major shifts in policy, or what you call policy somersaults. So that's why it's coming wide ahead of infrastructure.
But do you think these risks will decelerate or slow down anytime soon based on the current realities?
Well, the current reality is that from reports, from all indications, from INEC and what have you, it looks like we might have a smooth election, all said and done. And that is going to dramatically change the rankings, because when that disappears from the radar, then and they're all concerned. They all share the same concern about we've got to do something about security. We've got to do something about widespread poverty. Nobody's happy about 133 million people suffering multiple poverty. So the politicians are all on the same page in terms of what the challenges are and what the strategic priorities have to be. But the taste of the pudding is always in the eating. So we'll have to see how it plays out and who does what.
But in the middle of all of this, Professor Ken, if it is a new report by Oxfam, of course it's global and every country is taking what they have in there, that the top 3 Nigerian billionaires have a wealth that totals more than 80 million of us. I'm not sure if you're one of those 3 Nigerian billionaires. So, I just have to ask you if you are. It's my job to ask questions if you're one of those 3. The billionaires, whose wealth, just 3 of them, it's more than 85 million of the rest of us. What do these figures reveal to you about how deep the level of inequality in Nigeria?
Now, you have to add to that the FAO report that 25 million Nigerians are going to go into poverty, into food insecurity by August of this year. Already 17 million are there. So you have to add that. But the thing, when you come to the Oxfam report, I think there are some concerns that I have about this report because we don't have social safety net in this country. And when you talk 80 million immediately reminds you of 80 million that are below poverty line. It also reminds you of 80 million that are not even in the banking sector. So how do you actually know how much they are worth? And then it also reminds you about the fact that there is even 133 million that are facing multiple poverty. So that number is very suspect. But I mean, if you could say the same, three biggest millionaires in Nigeria are, worth more than that. How about America? I'm sure they are all in trillions. When you get the 3 richest Americans, their money is all in trillions. So I'm not sure that it makes much difference in the point that we have a market economy. You cannot look at a solution that is going to rob Peter to pay Paul. We just have to see how inclusive our economic development programs are going to be. And then I can tell you that some of these that you have just mentioned are actually doing their best in investing in the community, because that is what is important. They'll have social responsibility, they have foundation, they are investing heavily in this economy. And that is a very good news. So all we do is ask them to do more and the government to look at how we can help them to help others.
Well, Prof, how could the yawning gap between Nigeria's ultra-rich and the ultra-poor, how can we reduce that significantly? Any idea what we can do?
Many economies, many economies in Europe and America and UK, they bring in the social safety net, which is a minimum, condition. So you know that. So if rather than hang out on the street, they bring you into the social program, and then you get minimum. That's the way we don't have
social
that.
Safety net. Social safety net, Professor. Social safety net. Some of which we did during the COVID-19 and what have you, and what you call trader money and whatever, 5,000. That's not. Is that the right way to reduce inequality? We're talking about 3 biggest billionaires and 80 million people. How do you bridge it? How do we reduce it? By 5,000 naira, 10,000 naira?
No, those handouts are not the social safety net. They are just palliatives. Because in UK, for example, you have contributions of our contributions to national insurance going to fund the health service. And then anybody and everybody is entitled to go to receive the free health service. Then there are payments that are going out if you are, if you have a single parent, and then you have. So it's systematic and it's built in. It's not something that you get sporadic there and then. No, it's structured and is paid for by those who are working, that are earning the money and then using it to maintain that minimum.
But we need more Nigerians to work. Professor, we need more people to work. When you look at the International Labour Organization saying that the global employment will just be 1% this year and it's likely to be 0 next year. And we're looking at 30, 40% unemployment figure on our hands.
Our unemployment is even more embarrassing because it is 33.3% on average. For young people under 35, it is 48%, and underemployment 22%. So it's about 70% for our young people. But the fact of the matter is this: there are so many issues around unemployment that we have to think more about sustainable poverty reduction through investment. It is investment that will bring the opportunity for you to create the jobs or create economic activities. And then also, that economic activity is what generates the revenue, generates the surplus with which we pay for education and health. And that is the cycle. The cycle is not about robbing Peter to pay Paul or borrowing money to distribute. No, that's not the sustainable approach. That is not the sustainable poverty reduction program. So it is about seeing how inclusive can our development agenda be. For example, you know that 60% of our country employment is around agriculture. So you say, how do we make sure that, literally everybody have a look in. And that was what you saw happening in the last few years with Anko Burow's program that brought in 4 million people with money and then 5 million hectares. And we need a successor program, or at least an intensification of that kind of program. But that's the kind of area you would have to try. Look at artisanal mining, look at what is going on, and how do you bring down more midstream and downstream investment in the oil and gas sector to begin to hit the ground? How do you make sure that the artisanal miners can be brought under regulation so that they can be upgraded and make sure that all of these areas, you've got to be looking at these areas. And then, but in the end of the day, the ICT is doing well. The financial sector is doing extremely well, returning 18% growth. But if you don't tackle the food, clothing, those basic needs, we're going to be hanging around with these figures for a very, very long time.
Okay, so we got new reports. The AFDB new economic forecasts on Thursday projected Africa's economies will outpace the rest of the world this year and next year. I'm asking, what's your take? For example, Kenya is looking at about 6.2, 6.5% growth, while Nigeria will be doing just about half of that. So how quickly do you think the new administration need to work to ramp up very quickly when you look at about 2.3, 2.8% population growth on the other hand? No,
I think I like the report from ADB because it's very, very, very optimistic and about our future, and it took a longer term view. Now the thing is that it says about 4%, although we dropped from 4.8% average, Africa down to 3.8, and then we are going back again to 4% and 4% for 2023 and 2024. But what excites me about the figure is when you disaggregate the figure, you see a lot of the Francophone countries, becoming tiger economies. You could see them in the 2023, Luanda and all these Francophone countries, you see them posting from 5.5% growth rate to about 7% growth rate. And in 2024, it gets even more intense. You see the likes of Niger on top of us, going for 9.6, 9.5, So the Francophone countries, for some reason, they are taking off. Their economies are taking off. And Benin, Republic of Benin, is all in there. Cote d'Ivoire, they're all hitting from 7% to 9.5. They will all be in double digits by 2024. So that is good news. But then what we need to see is how do we make sure that growth is inclusive, so that more people will be carried along, and then that will sustainably reduce poverty.
In the manner of speaking, Professor, in the manner of speaking, the giants of Africa, in the manner of speaking, South Africa is practically on its knees right now when it comes to electricity, as much as Nigeria. And I'm trying to find out who is in a worse situation than the other. And then you've got Ghana dealing with massive debt. Nigeria has about $50 billion in debts coming from ways and means and what have you. So the big economies, if we exclude North Africa, Morocco, Egypt, and Algeria, Tunisia, so if you take them out of it and you look at the sub-Saharan Africa, now the French-speaking countries from DR Congo, like you said, to Niger Republic and Mali, and Benin Republic next door to Nigeria is becoming major economic frontier to look at. What does that tell you about what much we need to hit the ground running soon after this election in February?
Now, the Francophone countries have a different circumstance because you notice that they have very low inflation across them. Some are 2%, 1%, 0.8%. And that is the way their macroeconomy is engineered, because don't forget that France is still calling the shot in some respect, and they burn a lot of their reserves in trying to maintain those currency stability, which is linked to euro. So, it's not the best situation, but it's giving them the kind of growth and stability and low risks around their monetary policy. So that is that. But the giant economies, as you mentioned, the likes of Ghana, Nigeria, and we have a different latitudes around our macroeconomy, and we have resource rich. We are much more resource rich, and of course you have to value your freedom, of course, economic freedom, and then you have a higher play of political economy factors in these areas. And what that means is that you have interest of one individual or a number of individuals superseding national interest. And that will sort itself out over time. It's not going to be a permanent situation. They will sort themselves out over time by natural diffusion of economic opportunities. But the fact of the fact is that these tiger economies are going to go on as long as they are. But you see, you can't maintain that growth trajectory. Being around 10, you will come down. But for our own economies, like South Africa is a mature economy in decline. And it's not to be unexpected. After all, they have about 58,000 megawatts, 58,000 megawatts. So they are actually 40 times more power per capita than Nigeria. So their own is not as chronic as the case of Nigeria in terms of power. But we know that when Nigeria gets over their power problem, the growth of Nigeria will be phenomenal. Nigeria will be carrying, the way Nigeria is carrying the military weight of the whole of ECOWAS is the same way Nigeria will carry the economic weight of the African countries, because they are going to, that sleeping giant will wake up sooner than later and begin to mop up and use the resources that they have. Resources are enormous, 44 solid minerals, and then you have gas, the biggest gas reserve, you have oil, all these disturbances around the leakages and all that, they will go away. They're not going to be here forever. It's just saying we need good leadership. We need a very effective leadership, and that will turn all these problems away, and then we'll move and assert our position in the scheme of things. Many countries have seen it. America has identified Nigeria and said Nigeria is going to be the third biggest, largest population in the next, by 2050. They projected about 6.4 trillion GDP. We've seen all that, but it's just
I've seen the numbers as well. That's the question. That's my question. You just asking me the question. What's the leadership that will deliver? There's a difference between potential and promise, and what it all means in terms of what you actually performance. So that's the 3 Ps. So the gap between promise and potential and performance, they're different. So we need to move to performance. That's where the point is. So I'm asking, what type of leadership do you think we need moving forward? Yes.
No, we just need stronger economic leadership, because that is missing. It's like people will say, oh, you have a knife that is very sharp, it doesn't have a head. Then you have a knife that's had a head, but is not sharp. So we need a very strong economic leadership. I tell you why. And that leadership has to look at harvesting human resources and material and mineral resources. It's not one for the other after the, no. There are countries like Japan, they don't have solid mineral. It's simply investment in human capacity, electronics, car manufacture. That's what made them number 3 in the world. So our manpower must be prioritized. Look at diaspora, how many of them there? How many? 2 million, whatever, and they're bringing $26 billion into the economy. We have to invest in our human resources. It is a critical asset. How much natural resource has China in any case? Anyway, they're now number 2. And then not to talk of mineral resources. We have them. Nigeria has 4 times more surface water than South Africa. Surface water than South Africa. We have how many? 350 dams in Nigeria. How many of those dams are being used for aquaculture? China trawlers go around the whole world, yet China aquaculture is 4 times more than their capture fishery. And here Nigeria has 350 dams. We're not using any of those dams to grow our fish and have those. So, and we still have deficiency, 3 million metric tons a year. of fish that we have to go and buy and import. So we have the resources. They are all in this country. Name the solid mineral that is not in this country. We have lithium. We have name them. But who is mining them? Artisanal miners. And, we have to turn our back to some of these shenanigans we have gone through and get investment in the right place. And don't think it's all going to be foreign investment. There are more domestic investment that we can attract. How about Dangote put $19 billion? Is that not more than total investment that we've had, FDI, for the last 5 years? But it's a Nigerian. Okay. So we need to look at those 3 areas: natural resources, mineral resources, and human capital. Human capital drives the other 2. But we ignore that completely.
Professor Kenve, we're going to be continue this conversation all the way into the elections and beyond. Thank you so much, as always, for those drill down perspectives. Professor Kenve, thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening and enjoy your weekend. It's great to have you on the show, as always.